Queen Maria stood frozen on the crystal throne as Captain Jake Thompson stepped into the grand courtroom without lowering his head. The massive chamber fell silent instantly. Every alien diplomat, every council member, every guard stopped breathing. Jake walked forward with steady steps on the polished floors that reflected the light from 3 suns streaming through the palace windows. The Zephyrian ambassador's tentacles curled in shock. The Corvin delegation's scales began to shift color, a clear sign of extreme distress. Even the mechanical Nexus representatives emitted warning beeps that echoed off the high ceiling. In this court, everyone bowed to Queen Maria. Everyone except the human who now stood 20 feet from the throne. His hands relaxed at his sides, his brown eyes meeting her green ones directly. "Captain Thompson," the Queen said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "You seem to have forgotten our customs." Jake shook his head slowly. "I remember them perfectly, Your Majesty. I simply choose not to follow them." The words hit the court like a shockwave. Several alien officials made choking sounds. The royal guards reached for their weapons but stopped when Queen Maria raised her hand slightly. Her fingers remained steady on the armrest of her throne, but something flickered in her eyes that made the nearest courtiers step backward. "Explain yourself," she commanded. "I represent Earth and humanity in these peace talks," Jake replied, his voice calm but firm. "I bow to no one who demands submission from my species or treats us as lesser beings. Respect is earned, not commanded through fear." The Zephyrian ambassador's voice crackled through his translator. "This human shows dangerous disrespect to our queen. Such behavior cannot be tolerated in civilized space." Queen Maria turned her gaze to the ambassador, and he immediately shrank back. "Did I ask for your opinion, Ambassador?" The alien fell silent immediately. The Queen's attention returned to Jake, who had not moved from his position. His uniform was clean and pressed, his posture straight but not aggressive. He looked like a man who had made a decision and would stand by it regardless of the consequences. "You realize," Queen Maria said slowly, "that refusing to bow in my court has resulted in exile for some and worse for others?" "I do," Jake answered, without hesitation. "And you understand that your refusal could end these peace negotiations before they truly begin? If peace depends on my people kneeling, then it was never real peace to begin with." The Queen leaned forward slightly in her throne. The movement was small, but every alien in the room noticed it. Queen Maria had ruled this sector of space for 15 years, bringing together dozens of species under her banner. She was known for her intelligence, her fair judgment, and her absolute intolerance for disrespect. No one had ever refused to bow and lived to tell about it. "Captain Thompson," she said, "you speak of earning respect. What have humans done to earn mine?" Jake's expression remained steady. "We've traveled across the galaxy seeking allies, not subjects. We've offered our medical knowledge freely to heal sick worlds. We've shared our agricultural techniques to feed hungry populations. We've asked for partnership, not dominance. If that counts for nothing, then we'll return to Earth and defend ourselves as we always have." The Queen's fingers drummed once against her throne. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the silent chamber. Several council members exchanged worried glances. They had seen Queen Maria angry before, and it never ended well for those who caused her displeasure. "You would risk war with my alliance over a simple gesture?" she asked. "I would risk war to preserve human dignity," Jake replied, "but I'd prefer to avoid it through mutual respect." The Queen studied him for long seconds. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Then, slowly, something changed in her expression. The hard line of her mouth softened almost imperceptibly. Her eyes, which had been cold and calculating, warmed by a few degrees. "Interesting," she murmured, so quietly that only Jake could hear her. The captain waited, his breathing steady, his stance unchanged. Around them, the court held its collective breath. The Zephyrian ambassador's tentacles had turned a pale color that indicated severe stress. The Corvin delegates were whispering urgently among themselves in their clicking language. Even the stoic Nexus representatives seemed to be processing this unprecedented situation with unusual intensity. Queen Maria rose from her throne with fluid grace. She descended the 3 steps to the main floor, her long dress trailing behind her. Every eye in the room followed her movement. She walked directly toward Jake, who remained motionless as she approached. She stopped just outside arm's reach and looked up at him. Jake was several inches taller than she was, but her presence filled the space between them completely. "No one has ever refused to bow in my court," she said softly. "Then perhaps it was time someone did," Jake replied. Queen Maria's lips curved upward in the smallest possible smile. "Daw!" The court erupted in stunned gasps and urgent whispers. Several aliens began speaking at once in their native languages, creating a cacophony of confusion and disbelief. The queen had smiled. Not the cold, calculating smile she wore during negotiations, or the cruel smile that preceded punishment. This was something entirely different, something none of them had ever seen before. "Silence," the queen commanded, without raising her voice or turning away from Jake. The room fell quiet instantly. She continued to study the human captain's face, searching for something in his expression. Jake met her gaze without flinching, without arrogance, without fear. "Tell me, Captain," she said, "what do you see when you look at me?" Part 1 ended exactly at 1,000 words. Jake considered her question carefully before answering. "I see a ruler who has united many different species under one banner. I see someone who has brought peace to worlds that were at war for centuries. I see intelligence, strength, and the weight of difficult decisions. But I also see someone who may have forgotten what it feels like to be treated as an equal rather than a superior." The queen's smile grew slightly wider, and several court members made sounds of distress. The royal guards shifted nervously, unsure whether they should intervene or remain still. The alien ambassadors whispered among themselves with increasing urgency. "You think I need to be reminded of equality?" Queen Maria asked. "I think everyone does sometimes," Jake replied. "Power has a way of changing perspective. Even good leaders can lose touch with what it means to stand on level ground with others." "And you believe refusing to bow accomplishes this?" "I believe showing respect without surrendering dignity accomplishes this. I can acknowledge your authority and your achievements without declaring myself inferior to you." The queen walked slowly around Jake, studying him from different angles. He remained facing forward, not turning to track her movement. His confidence was quiet but unshakable, and she found this more intriguing than any display of deference would have been. "The Zephyrians bow because their culture values hierarchy," she said, continuing her circle. "The Corvans bow because they fear conflict. The Nexus bow because their programming tells them to respect authority. Why do most humans bow when they meet me?" "Because they want something from you," Jake answered without hesitation. "Alliance, protection, trade agreements. They bow because they think it's the price of admission to your good graces. But you want nothing. I want peace between our peoples, but not at the cost of human dignity. If we start this relationship by kneeling, we'll never stand as true partners." Queen Maria completed her circle and faced him again. "You realize this conversation could be viewed as a test of my authority by every species in this room?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "And that how I respond to your defiance will be reported to every world in my alliance?" "Yes. Some will see mercy as weakness. Others will interpret tolerance as loss of control." Jake nodded slowly. "That's the burden of leadership. Every decision reflects not just your personal values, but your fitness to rule. I don't envy you that responsibility." The queen stopped walking and stood directly in front of him again. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Captain Thompson. My wife says I'm both, depending on the day." A soft laugh escaped Queen Maria's lips before she could stop it. The sound sent shockwaves through the assembled court. Several aliens began speaking rapidly in their native tongues. The Zephyrian ambassador's tentacles were now almost white with stress. "She sounds like a wise woman," the queen said. "Lisa is many things. Wise, patient, occasionally exasperated with my choices. But she supports me even when she thinks I'm taking unnecessary risks. Like today, especially today. She told me to be respectful but not to compromise who we are as a people. She said if I came home having surrendered human dignity for the sake of convenience, she'd never let me hear the end of it." Queen Maria laughed again, more openly this time. The sound was warm and genuine, completely unlike the cold humor she sometimes displayed during negotiations. "I think I would like to meet this Lisa. She would be honored by the invitation, Your Majesty." The Queen raised an eyebrow. You use my title even while refusing to bow. Some would call that contradictory. I call it balanced. I can acknowledge your position and show respect for your achievements without performing gestures that imply my subservience. Titles reflect roles and responsibilities. Bowing reflects power dynamics. And you reject power dynamics? I reject unnecessary hierarchy. Some situations require clear chains of command. Military operations, emergency responses, specialized fields where expertise matters. But when we're talking as equals about the future of our peoples, I see no reason to start from a position that suggests you're inherently more valuable than I am. Queen Maria was quiet for several long moments. The court waited in tense silence, watching for any sign of how she would respond to this continued defiance. The guards remained ready to act, but their queen gave them no signal to intervene. Captain Thompson, she finally said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, you have given me much to consider. These negotiations will require careful thought from all parties involved. I agree completely, Your Majesty. I hereby declare a recess until tomorrow morning. All parties will use this time to reflect on the nature of respect, dignity, and partnership. She turned to address the full assembly. This court is dismissed. The aliens began filing out immediately, their conversations animated and concerned. The guards remained at their posts but relaxed their readiness. Queen Maria watched the exodus for a moment before turning back to Jake. Walk with me, she said quietly. Without waiting for a response, she moved toward a side door that led to her private chambers. Jake followed, ignoring the stares of the remaining courtiers. The Queen's pace was unhurried, giving no indication of her thoughts or intentions. They walked through a corridor lined with windows that looked out over the capital city. The architecture was a blend of human and alien influences, creating something both familiar and exotic. The Queen stopped at one of the larger windows and looked out at the bustling streets below. Tell me about Earth, she said. Jake joined her at the window. It's beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, cities that reach toward the sky and wilderness that stretches beyond the horizon. 7 billion humans living and working and dreaming together. And they sent you to speak for all of them? They sent me to speak for our values, freedom, dignity, the right to self-determination, the belief that cooperation works better than domination. Queen Maria turned to study his profile as he looked out the window. Even if it means risking everything. Especially then, Jake replied, and in the growing afternoon light, the Queen smiled again. That evening, Jake sat in his assigned quarters reviewing the day's events. The rooms were comfortable, but clearly designed to remind visiting dignitaries of their guest status. Everything was slightly too large or too small for human proportions, a subtle reminder that they were not on home ground. The communication console chimed softly, and he activated it to find Lisa's face filling the screen. So, she said without preamble, how badly did you mess things up? Jake laughed despite his exhaustion. That depends on your perspective. I may have just destroyed human diplomatic relations with the most powerful alliance in this sector of space. Or I may have opened the door to a real partnership based on mutual respect. Lisa studied his face through the connection. You didn't bow. I didn't bow. Good. How did she take it? Jake described the throne room scene, the tense conversation, and the Queen's unexpected reactions. Lisa listened without interruption, her expression growing more thoughtful with each detail. She smiled. Lisa said when he finished, "That's not what you were expecting." No one was expecting it. The alien ambassadors looked like they were gonna faint. I think some of them have never seen her smile at all. Maybe that's the point. Maybe she's tired of being surrounded by people who only show her fear and calculated deference. Jake nodded slowly. That's what I'm hoping. But it's also possible she was just amused by my audacity before deciding how to punish it. Do you regret it? The question hung between them for several seconds. Jake considered all the possible outcomes, all the ways this gamble could destroy everything they had worked toward. Then he thought about the moment when Queen Maria's cold expression had warmed, when her smile had transformed her entire face. No, he said finally. Even if this ends badly, even if we have to return to Earth with nothing, I don't regret. treating her like a person instead of a throne. And you made the right choice. Whatever happens tomorrow, you stayed true to who we are. After ending the call, Jake stood at the window of his quarters and looked out at the alien city below. The streets were lit by bioluminescent plants that created patterns of blue and green light. Vehicles moved silently through the air between towering spires that reached toward the stars. It was beautiful and strange, a reminder of just how far from home he truly was. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. Jake opened it to find a young human woman in palace staff clothing. She looked nervous but determined. "Captain Thompson, my name is Rebecca Martinez. I work in the Palace Communications Center. What can I do for you, Rebecca? I wanted to thank you for today, for not bowing." She glanced around the corridor quickly. "I've been working here for 2 years, ever since Earth established diplomatic relations. Every day I watch humans defer to aliens, apologize for taking up space, act grateful for whatever scraps of respect we receive." Jake stepped aside and gestured for her to enter. Rebecca shook her head. "I can't stay, but I needed you to know that some of us have been waiting for someone to remind everyone that humans have value too. That we don't have to bow and scrape just because we're new to galactic politics." "What's the word around the palace?" Jake asked, confused, excited, terrified. "The alien staff keep asking each other what it means that the Queen smiled at you. The human staff are split between admiration and worry that you've made things worse for all of us." "And what do you think?" Rebecca straightened her shoulders. "I think you showed everyone that humans can stand tall. Whatever happens tomorrow, you proved we're not naturally subservient. Thank you for that." After she left, Jake returned to the window. The city lights seemed brighter now, more welcoming. He thought about all the humans like Rebecca who had been watching from the shadows, hoping someone would stand up for human dignity. Tomorrow's negotiations would determine much more than trade agreements or military alliances. They would establish humanity's place in the galactic community for generations to come. His door chimed again, but this time when he opened it, he found 2 royal guards waiting in the corridor. "Captain Thompson," the larger one said, "Her Majesty requests your presence in her private study." Jake followed them through passages he had not seen before, decorated with artwork from dozens of different worlds. The study was smaller than the throne room, but still impressive, filled with books and data tablets from across the galaxy. Queen Maria sat behind a desk made from what appeared to be crystallized wood. She was no longer wearing her formal court dress, but rather simple, comfortable clothing that made her seem more approachable. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Jake settled into the seat, noting that it was actually sized correctly for a human. The Queen dismissed the guards with a wave, and they closed the door as they left. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Queen Maria said. "About respect and dignity and the nature of power, and I realize I may have forgotten some important things while building this alliance. When you've spent years dealing with species that measure worth through submission, it becomes easy to mistake deference for loyalty." Jake remained quiet, sensing that she had more to say. "The Zephyrians bow because their entire social structure is based on hierarchy. Challenge that, and their civilization collapses. The Corvins bow because they're naturally non-confrontational. Force them to stand and they'll flee rather than fight. But humans are different. Humans are problematic. You question authority, challenge assumptions, refuse to accept things just because that's how they've always been done. You're exhausting." Jake smiled slightly. "We've been told that before. I imagine you have. But you're also refreshing." The admission seemed to surprise her as much as it did him. Queen Maria stood and walked to a window that offered a view of the palace gardens. The plants were from dozens of different worlds, somehow made to grow together in harmony. Jake joined her, maintaining a respectful distance. Building this alliance required compromise from everyone. She said softly, "The Zephyrians had to accept non-hierarchical species. The Corvins had to join military partnerships despite their peaceful nature. The Nexus had to work with organic beings they found inefficient. Everyone gave up something." "What did you give up?" Jake asked. The question seemed to catch her off guard. She was quiet for a long moment, her reflection visible in the window glass alongside his. "I gave up the luxury of being wrong," she said finally. When you're responsible for the safety and prosperity of billions of beings across dozens of worlds, you can't afford to make mistakes. Every decision has to be calculated, every response measured. You learn to project strength even when you feel uncertain, to demand respect even when you're not sure you deserve it. That sounds lonely. It is, but loneliness is a small price to pay for peace. Jake turned to look at her directly. Is it, though? What good is peace if it costs you your humanity? I'm not human, Captain. No, but you're a person. You have thoughts and feelings and doubts just like everyone else. The crown doesn't change that, no matter how heavy it gets. Queen Maria's reflection smiled sadly in the window. You really don't understand the concept of diplomatic deference, do you? I understand it perfectly. I just think it's overrated. Respect shouldn't require performance. And yet your refusal to bow was itself a performance, wasn't it? A calculated gesture designed to make a point? Jake considered this. Maybe. But the point was that humans won't pretend to be less than we are. If that's performance, at least it's honest performance. The Queen turned to face him fully. Do you know why I really called you here tonight? To decide whether to have me executed or exiled? She laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. Nothing so dramatic. I wanted to have a conversation with someone who sees me as a person rather than a symbol. It's been educational. I'm glad I could help, Your Majesty. Maria, she said quietly, when we're alone like this, you can call me Maria. The offer surprised him more than anything that had happened in the throne room. Are you sure? That seems like a significant breach of protocol. I'm the one who makes protocol, and right now I'm tired of being Your Majesty every moment of every day. I'm tired of calculated responses and political maneuvering. I'm tired of being alone at the top of a hierarchy I built to keep everyone in their proper place. Jake studied her face, looking for any sign that this was another test, but all he saw was weariness and a longing for genuine connection. All right, Maria. Though I should warn you that Lisa will be insufferably proud when I tell her I'm on a first-name basis with the most powerful person in the galaxy. Lisa sounds like exactly the kind of person who would keep you grounded. I envy that. You could have that too, you know. People around you who care more about your well-being than your title. Maria walked back to her desk and picked up a data tablet. These are the preliminary terms the Zephyrian ambassador proposed for human integration into the Alliance. Would you like to see them? Jake took the tablet and read through the document. His expression grew darker with each line. This isn't a partnership, he said when he finished. This is a list of restrictions and requirements designed to keep humans in a subordinate position permanently. That's exactly what it is. The Zephyrians see humans as a potential threat to the established order. They want you contained and controlled. And the other species? The Corvins would accept any agreement that maintains peace. The Nexus calculate that human technological innovation could be useful, but want strict limitations on military applications. Everyone wants the benefits of human membership without the disruption human independence might cause. Jake set the tablet aside. Then these negotiations were pointless before they began. You've already decided to reject humanity as an equal partner. I haven't decided anything yet. Haven't you? If this is the starting position, if every species in your alliance wants to keep humans as junior members at best, what possible outcome could change that? Maria sat behind her desk again, her fingers steepled in front of her. What if I told you there was another option? I'd be interested to hear it. What if humans didn't join the Alliance as members? What if they became something else entirely? Jake waited for her to continue, sensing that this conversation was moving in a direction neither of them had expected when it began. Partners, Maria said quietly. Not members of the Alliance, but partners with it. A separate but equal relationship that doesn't require you to conform to existing hierarchies or surrender your independence. That would require your other allies to accept humans as equals to their collective alliance. That seems like an even harder sell than simple membership. It would be harder. But it would also be more honest. Humans don't fit into the Alliance structure as it exists. You're too independent, too questioning, too willing to challenge authority. But maybe that's exactly what the Alliance needs. Jake leaned forward in his chair. What do you mean? I mean, maybe I've built something that's too stable, too controlled. Maybe peace maintained through rigid hierarchy isn't as strong as peace built through genuine cooperation. Maybe what we all need is someone willing to question whether we're doing things the right way. The implications of what she was suggesting began to dawn on him. You're talking about restructuring the entire alliance. I'm talking about evolution, natural growth, the addition of a species that forces everyone else to examine their assumptions and improve their systems. The other species won't accept that willingly. Maria's smile returned, but this time it carried a hint of steel. The other species will accept whatever I decide is best for the Alliance. That's why they chose me as their queen. Jake realized he was seeing another side of the woman across from him. Not just the lonely ruler or the curious person, but the brilliant strategist who had united dozens of species under her leadership. This was someone who thought in terms of decades and centuries, who could see possibilities others missed entirely. You've been planning this from the beginning, he said. I've been waiting for the right catalyst, someone who could embody human independence while still showing respect for others, someone who could stand firm without being aggressive, who could challenge without being destructive. And you think I'm that person? I think you're exactly what I've been waiting for, Jake Thompson. The next morning brought unprecedented chaos to the palace. Word had somehow spread that Queen Maria was considering a fundamental restructuring of the Alliance. The alien ambassadors demanded emergency sessions. Their home governments sent urgent messages. The palace staff worked frantically to manage the crisis of confidence that threatened to tear apart 15 years of careful diplomacy. Jake found himself in the center of the storm, escorted by guards to meeting after meeting where alien officials made increasingly desperate arguments for maintaining the status quo. The Zephyrian ambassadors' tentacles had remained pale with stress since dawn. The Corvin delegates clicked anxiously in their native language. Even the normally imperturbable Nexus representatives seemed to be overheating their processing units. This human has created dangerous instability, the Zephyrian ambassador declared during the third emergency session of the morning. His disrespectful behavior has given the Queen ideas that threaten the foundation of our peaceful alliance. The foundation was already cracked, Jake replied calmly. I just pointed out where the flaws were showing. You pointed out nothing. You simply refused to follow proper protocols. Sometimes proper protocols are the problem. Queen Maria, who had remained largely silent during these exchanges, finally stood from her throne. The room fell quiet immediately. Ambassador, she said to the Zephyrian, you speak of peace and stability as if they're the same thing. They're not. Stability can be maintained through oppression. Peace requires justice. Your Majesty, surely you don't mean to suggest that our alliance has been unjust? I suggest that any system requiring some participants to diminish themselves for the comfort of others contains the seeds of its own destruction. The Corvin delegate spoke up, his voice gentle but worried. Great Queen, change brings uncertainty. Uncertainty brings conflict. Is it wise to risk what we have built together? What we have built together is impressive, Maria acknowledged, but it's also incomplete. We've created an alliance of species willing to follow established patterns. We've never tested whether those patterns serve everyone equally well. Jake watched the interplay of personalities and politics with growing understanding. These weren't evil beings seeking to oppress humanity. They were people who had found something that worked for them and feared losing it to unknown changes. Their resistance came from genuine concern for their people's welfare, not from malice. Your Majesty, he said, drawing everyone's attention, perhaps we're approaching this backwards. How so? We're debating whether to change the alliance to accommodate humans. But what if humans proved we could work within the existing structure while still maintaining our independence? The alien ambassadors looked confused, but Queen Maria's eyes sharpened with interest. Explain, she commanded. What if Earth signed a treaty that gave us observer status for 1 year? We participate in Alliance activities, follow Alliance protocols where appropriate, but maintain our independence during the trial period. At the end of the year, everyone could evaluate whether human involvement strengthens or weakens the Alliance. The Zephyrian ambassador's tentacles began to regain some color. A trial period. This would allow for careful observation without permanent commitment, and if humans prove incompatible with Alliance values, the Corvin delegate added hopefully, they would leave without disrupting existing relationships. Even the Nexus representatives seemed to find this proposal more acceptable. Their leader emitted a series of beeps that Jake's translator rendered as cautious approval, but Queen Maria was studying Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read. "That's a very diplomatic solution, Captain," she said slowly. "Sometimes diplomacy serves everyone's interests." "Indeed it does. But it also avoids the fundamental question we've been dancing around, which is whether true partnership requires equal standing from the beginning, or whether it can be earned through demonstration over time." Jake realized he was being tested again, but this time the test was more subtle. Maria was asking him to choose between the safe path of gradual acceptance and the risky path of demanding immediate equality. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I think true partnership requires mutual respect and good faith efforts from everyone involved. Sometimes that means accepting intermediate steps when they serve the greater goal of eventual equality, even if those intermediate steps look suspiciously like the gradual submission everyone assumes humans will eventually accept." The question cut to the heart of his concerns. Was he finding a clever compromise, or was he allowing humanity to be maneuvered into the same subordinate position through slower means? "Not if everyone clearly understands that the goal is partnership, not assimilation," he replied. "Not if humans maintain the right to leave if the trial period demonstrates that equality isn't really on the table." Queen Maria smiled, and this time every alien in the room recognized it as a sign of approval rather than amusement. "Very well," she announced. "We shall proceed with Captain Thompson's proposal. Earth will be granted observer status in the Galactic Alliance for 1 standard year. During this period, human representatives will participate in Alliance activities while maintaining their independence and their right to withdraw at any time." The alien ambassadors began speaking at once, some expressing relief, others raising concerns about specific details. But Jake was watching Queen Maria, and he saw something in her expression that told him this wasn't the end of their negotiations. It was just the beginning. As the formal session concluded and the various delegations dispersed to contact their home governments, Queen Maria approached Jake. "Walk with me again," she said quietly. They made their way to the palace gardens, where the afternoon sun created patterns of light and shadow among the alien plants. The queen seemed more relaxed now, as if some burden had been lifted from her shoulders. "That was well played," she said as they walked along a path lined with flowering vines from the Corvin homeworld. "Was it a game?" "Everything in politics is a game, Jake. The question is whether you're playing to win or playing not to lose." He considered this, which was I doing. "You were playing to win, but you were wise enough to recognize that sometimes winning means accepting a smaller victory that opens the door to a larger one later." They stopped beside a fountain that combined water features from several different worlds. The sound of flowing water created a peaceful backdrop for their conversation. "Can I ask you something, Maria?" "Of course. Yesterday when I refused to bow, what were you really thinking?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching the play of water and light in the fountain. "I was thinking that I hadn't seen genuine courage in my court for a very long time," she said finally. "I was thinking that power tends to surround itself with people who reflect it back rather than challenge it. I was thinking that maybe I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone treat me like a person who could be wrong. And today I'm thinking that humans might be exactly what this alliance needs, even if they're not what anyone wants. Growth requires discomfort. Evolution demands adaptation. Maybe it's time we all learned to be a little less comfortable in our established roles." Jake turned to face her fully. "Are you saying you planned this outcome from the beginning?" Queen Maria's smile was enigmatic. "I'm saying I created the conditions for the best possible outcome and trusted that intelligent people would find their way to it. The fact that you chose compromise over confrontation tells me that humans can indeed be partners rather than just another species seeking membership." As they walked back toward the palace, Jake reflected on the events of the past 2 days. He had come here prepared to demand equality and leave with dignity if it was refused. Instead, he was returning to Earth with something potentially more valuable, an opportunity to prove that humans could be trusted with real partnership. The trial year would bring its own challenges, but for the first time since arriving on the Alliance capital world, Jake felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Behind them, the alien plants in the garden swayed in a breeze that carried the scent of a dozen different worlds, all somehow managing to grow together in the same soil. 6 months later, Jake stood in the same throne room where his refusal to bow had started everything. But this time, he wasn't alone. Dr. Sarah Kim from the Medical Corps was presenting their latest breakthrough in treating Corvin scale rot. Commander Alex Rivera was explaining how human tactical innovations had helped resolve a border dispute without violence. Engineer Maya Patel was demonstrating technology that could restore damaged ecosystems on wounded worlds. The alien ambassadors were no longer looking at humans with suspicion and barely concealed hostility. The Zephyrian ambassadors' tentacles remained their natural blue color during meetings. The Corvin delegates had begun asking direct questions instead of communicating only through worried clicks. Even the Nexus representatives had upgraded their translation protocols to better understand human communication patterns, but the most significant change was in Queen Maria herself. She still commanded absolute respect from her subjects, still made the final decisions that affected billions of lives across dozens of worlds, but she also laughed more often, asked more questions, and seemed genuinely interested in perspectives that differed from her own. The lonely ruler who had craved simple human conversation had discovered that she could be both queen and person simultaneously. The medical applications alone justify human partnership, she was saying to the assembled council. Dr. Kim's work has saved thousands of lives across 3 sectors. The tactical innovations have prevented 2 wars and minimized casualties in a 3rd, added General Marcus Webb, the Nexus military coordinator. Human strategic thinking offers perspectives our standard protocols cannot provide. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrians spoke up, his tentacles a healthy shade of blue-green. Your Majesty, the Zephyrian High Council has instructed me to formally recommend extending the human trial period and beginning negotiations for full partnership status. Jake tried to hide his surprise. 6 months ago, this same ambassador had demanded his exile for disrespecting protocol. Now he was advocating for human advancement within the Alliance structure. The Corvin Assembly concurs, added Delegate Morkesh, her clicking translated smoothly by the improved systems. Human contributions have exceeded all expectations. We believe formal partnership would benefit all members. Queen Maria looked around the room, her gaze settling finally on Jake. As the human representative, what is your people's position on these recommendations? Jake had prepared for this moment, but standing here in the room where everything had started, he felt the weight of history and possibility pressing down on him. Your Majesty, 6 months ago I came here hoping humans could earn a place in galactic society. What we found instead is something better. We've found that we can contribute to something larger than ourselves while remaining true to who we are. We've discovered that partnership doesn't require anyone to diminish themselves. He paused, looking at each alien representative in turn. But we've also learned that real partnership is built through consistent action, not grand gestures. Earth would be honored to accept full partnership in the Galactic Alliance, but we want to earn it through continued service and cooperation, not receive it as a reward for good behavior during a trial period. The Zephyrian ambassador's tentacles shifted to a color Jake had never seen before, something between admiration and amusement. You wish to extend your trial period voluntarily? We wish to move forward when everyone is certain we belong here, not just when we've met the minimum requirements. Queen Maria stood from her throne and descended to the main floor just as she had 6 months earlier, but this time her movement felt like a celebration rather than a confrontation. Captain Thompson, she said formally, on behalf of the Galactic Alliance, I offer humanity full partnership status, with all rights, responsibilities, and privileges therein. Jake straightened his shoulders and looked directly at the Queen. Your Majesty, on behalf of humanity and Earth, I accept partnership in the Galactic Alliance. He did not bow. Queen Maria smiled broadly, and this time no one in the court was surprised by the expression. Then let us begin the work of true partners, she said, extending her hand toward him. Jake shook her hand firmly, sealing an agreement that would shape the future of multiple species for generations to come. Around them, the assembled representatives began speaking excitedly in their various languages, already planning new collaborations and shared initiatives. As the formal ceremony concluded and the various delegations began to disperse, Queen Maria approached Jake one final time. "You know," she said quietly, "you could bow now if you wanted to. The political necessity that kept you standing has passed." Jake considered this seriously. Would it mean something different now than it would have 6 months ago? It would mean whatever you chose it to mean. He thought about everything that had led to this moment, the risk he had taken in refusing to show subservience, the conversations that had revealed the person behind the crown, the months of proving that respect and dignity could coexist, the gradual building of trust between species that had never truly understood each other. Then Jake smiled and gave Queen Maria a slight nod of acknowledgement, the same gesture he might offer to any respected colleague. "I think this works better," he said. Maria laughed, the sound carrying clearly through the great chamber. "I think you're right." As they walked together toward the reception where the real work of partnership would begin, Jake reflected on Lisa's words from 6 months earlier. She had told him to be respectful but not to compromise who they were as a people. Looking around at the aliens and humans mingling freely, sharing ideas and building relationships based on mutual regard rather than hierarchy, he thought he had managed to do exactly that. Behind them, the empty throne room stood ready for the next group of species seeking to join the ever-expanding community of worlds. The crystal throne remained a symbol of authority and leadership, but it no longer represented the absolute submission of those who stood before it. Instead, it had become a symbol of the possibility that different peoples could come together as equals, each contributing their unique strengths to something greater than any could achieve alone, and in the end, Jake thought, that was worth standing up for. The late afternoon sun streamed through the great windows, illuminating a space where respect no longer required dominance, where partnership had replaced hierarchy, and where the simple act of remaining standing had changed the nature of power itself. In the months and years that followed, historians would write about the human who refused to bow and the queen who smiled at his defiance. They would analyze the political implications and strategic outcomes of that first meeting. But they would miss the most important part of the story. They would miss the moment when two people from different worlds chose to see each other as equals, and in doing so created a foundation for true peace that would endure long after both their names were forgotten. The galaxy was a little less lonely, a little more just, and a little more hopeful, because one human had stood tall and one queen had remembered what it meant to be a person first and a ruler second. And that, more than any treaty or alliance, was what would last forever.